Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the second day of WFO Asia Pacific Summit 2023. This morning, we will be focusing on the sustainable supply chain in the Asia Pacific, and it is with great honor and pleasure, let us welcome our first speaker to the stage. Please welcome Senior Analyst Offshore Wind at Westwood Global Energy Group, Ms. Ruth Chen. Please welcome. Ms. Chen will be sharing her presentation on a sustainable supply chain in Asia Pacific, the current status and challenges. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. We would like to first thank the organizers, WFO World Forum Offshore Wind, for inviting us, Westwood Global Energy Group, to present at this event. Westwood Global Energy Group is a market intelligence and consulting company focused on the energy sector. My name is Ruth Chen, and I'm a senior analyst for offshore wind, particularly in the Asian region. I will present on the current status and challenges for the Asia Pacific offshore wind supply chain. Today's data and analytics comes from our product WindLogix, which is a database and analytics tool covering the global offshore wind and power projects. It contains information pertaining to the offshore wind supply chain, as well as commercial and leasing round information. This is an overview of the global offshore wind market, where we can see the breakdown of capacity by region and countries. From the chart on the left, we note that in the last 5 years to date, Asia accounts for 66% of new capacity additions, while Europe contributed 34%. As you can see, mainland China is a major contributor with 62%, and most of the additions were in 2021 before the national subsidy for offshore wind ended. The current global offshore wind market is seen in the waterfall chart on the right, with mainland China being the biggest market with 30.5 gigawatts of operational capacity. And we note that 5 of the top 6 countries in terms of operational capacity remains in Europe. The top 3 countries in Asia in terms of operational capacity are mainland China, Vietnam, and Taiwan in that order. Although Vietnam's experience with offshore wind is mostly intertidal, or what you call nearshore. Having seen the global picture, we now do a deep dive into the Asia Pacific offshore wind market. Asia Pacific currently has 32.5 gigawatts of operational capacity, and we expect it to reach 165 gigawatts by 2030. Out of this 165 gigawatts, we expect about 6 gigawatts of floating wind to be online by 2030 in the Asia Pacific region. In terms of expenditure, an estimated 472 billion is expected to be spent between 2023 and 2030. And out of the total Asian offshore expenditure between 2020 and 2030, about 56% is allocated to turbines. This table shows the status of the Asia Pacific supply chain by countries with reference to the expenditure outlook and capacity pipeline till 2030. Mainland China has the highest expenditure outlook and capacity pipeline, and this is followed by South Korea, Vietnam, and Taiwan. We also look at the supply chain local content, technology transfer, as well as the supply chain maturity. In terms of technology transfer, Taiwan, Japan, and Korea are considered high at this stage. Turbine manufacturing technology in particular is entering these countries. This technology transfer is partly due to the localization requirements. Mainland China and Vietnam are currently medium in terms of technology transfer, given their relatively mature markets. In terms of local content, we note that the Chinese and the Taiwanese have considered high local content compared to the rest of the region. And we note that Vietnam has developed its 1.4 gigawatts of operational capacity with minimal local content requirements. South Korea has recently decided to abolish the incentives to give more renewable energy certificates, or RECs, to a developer's offshore wind project when its local content ratio is 50% or higher. This move comes more than 1 year after the incentive was first introduced in December 2021. The government, however, asserts that the competitive bidding system of the RECs still give offshore wind power projects extra points if they have a higher ratio of domestic components. And of course, we hear from Japan that they have a goal of local content of 60% by 2040. Now, in terms of supply chain maturity, the Chinese and the Taiwanese have the most matured supply chains, while Vietnam's supply chain maturity is predominantly associated with intertidal or nearshore wind farm developments. This slide shows us the market share of supply chain in Asia Pacific to date. These charts show the top 6 contractors for turbines, turbine foundations, and cables. There is a mixture of international and local contractors, with Asian suppliers gaining market share in Asian offshore wind. In terms of turbine manufacturers, we note that the turbine market is dominated by Siemens Gamesa and Vestas, similar to what it is in Europe. We also note recent commercial developments that have been announced. For instance, SK Ocean Plant's collaboration with Koryo Generation to work together on 6.8 gigawatts of offshore wind projects in the region. We also heard about NKT's upcoming joint venture with Huaxin Lihua, which could be a game changer for the cable market, and they are said to be also ready for the floating wind market in Taiwan. So as you can see, the Asia Pacific market share for turbine foundations and cables is quite diverse. We now examine the market entry strategies of international original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, in APEC supply chain. The green boxes indicate solid investment from market entrants. Partnership with local players have resulted in actual output of wind farm equipment. For instance, in terms of turbine market segment, both Siemens Gamesa and Vestas have invested substantially in Taiwan, and another significant collaboration is the Century Blade Foundation. The light brown boxes indicate partnerships that are still at the MOU stage or strategic partnership stage. Notice that GE has chosen to set up strategic partnerships in Japan and South Korea, but have not moved beyond the strategic partnership stage. And lastly, the dark brown boxes indicate collaborations of a certain significant investment, such as in the joint venture stage. As we mentioned earlier, NKT's intention to set up a JV in Taiwan to target the offshore cables market. According to NKT, the JV is targeting to deliver enough output to support 3 offshore wind projects in Taiwan per annum. In this slide, we discuss the challenges of developing a sustainable supply chain, which technically all markets face, but the extent of difficulty depends on the market maturity. First on the list is cost inflation. The global turbine manufacturers have cited cost inflation concerns for their lackluster financial results in the last few quarters. Raw material prices are still affecting the final costs, while developers are focusing on the bankability of their projects, adding extra complexity to commercial negotiations. Second on the list is regulatory uncertainty and deliverability of national capacity targets. The fast evolving regulations for offshore wind development is a result of the quest to achieve national capacity targets. Japan, for instance, has included the speed of bringing projects online a key criteria of their current auction round. Similarly, Taiwan's regulations are fast evolving to include palatable localization rules for developers to balance costs with fulfilling the requirements. And lastly, supply-based transparency, which is something very difficult to achieve, but it appears if you examine the turbine market in Asia Pacific, each turbine manufacturer has chosen the supply bases and the strategies made known. As supply chains are brought closer together geographically, regional hubs of interconnected economic activities are emerging. Coordinated and complementary hubs in the region can enable shared prosperity by increasing productivity and export competitiveness while decreasing the rivalry pressures that restrain offshore wind growth. So out of these challenges, we see an opportunity in adopting a regional approach, a strategy we are hearing more often now that Asia-Pacific offshore wind is growing rapidly. The benefits to be gotten are not without the challenges we mentioned here. For the rest of the day, we will hear some of these themes discussed and mentioned by industry participants, perhaps sharing their experiences and challenges. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I hope it has presented you a useful overview of Asia-Pacific offshore wind supply chain. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Chen, for that comprehensive presentation. Please return to your seats. And next, please welcome Head of Public Relations at Intercontinental Wind Energy, Ms. Quina Lin. Ms. Lin will be sharing her presentation on the wind turbine upscaling versus offshore wind in Taiwan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Lin.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Quina. I'm from the Intercontinental Wind Energy. You're probably not very familiar with this name, but you will get to know later on. So thanks for having us. And today, I'm going to talk about the wind turbine upscaling versus offshore wind in Taiwan. Okay. So this is the outline for the following minutes. We will first look at the evolution of offshore wind turbines in Taiwan. And then we will look at the impact of upscaling wind turbines synchronously bring the foundations to a larger size, and which also brings the challenges to the Taiwan market. And to deal with the challenges, we would like to provide a new solution in the end. Sorry. Okay. So as you may know, that Taiwan's offshore wind has now entered its third phase. And if you look at the turbine's capacity in each phase, we will see the upscaling trend. In phase 1, the developed capacity of turbine ranged from 5.2 megawatt to 8 megawatt. And in phase 2, the developed turbine capacity ranged from 8 megawatt to 14 megawatt. Next phase turbine's capacity is expected to be 15 megawatt above. So the capacity of turbine is increasing in Taiwan market. Okay, so we wonder if the capacity of turbine is increasing in the Taiwan market. Does it mean foundation is upscaling too? And if the answer is yes, then what are the challenges that we are going to face in the Taiwan market? Now, here's the evolution of offshore wind foundations. We could see the foundation gets larger with the increasing capacity of turbines. In the Taiwan market, we see monopiles and jacket foundations in our current fixed wind farm. And soon, we will see the floating demonstrations. By then, the weight of production in the bottom part of turbines is going to increase from 200 tons to 2,000 tons, which is 10 times more. So with foundation upscaling, there are a few challenges that we see: vessels, fabrications, technical skill, and the harbors. So firstly, we will face the challenges of securing large vessels. We all know that after a pandemic, many projects in every country are now speeding up. So the vessel supply chain is become much more tiny than before. And not just that, we also will need a larger production base and the latest model of machines for producing the bigger component. We also need more welding talent and more manpower to execute the production. So lastly, we need a welder hinterland and a harbor with a deep water wharf for the component storage, pre-assembling, and loading out for installation. Now let's take a step back and look at our current foundation localization. According to Basic Industry of Offshore Wind Foundation Industrial Upgrading Plan, from phase 1 to phase 2, the demand for the pin pile foundations is 884. The demand for the jacket is 272. But the local supply chain is still navigating the learning curve. Disadvantageously, the lack of local talent, narrow hinterland, and shallow water wharf made the supply chain take a longer time to build up a chain that is strong enough to meet up the demand locally. So with current challenges and the future challenges ahead, we need a new solution for upscaling foundations. And therefore, Intercontinental Wind Energy was established in June 2021. Before we established, we had successfully made the first pin pile locally and delivered to Taiwan. And in July 2022, we invested 3 billion new Taiwanese dollar at the Kaohsiung Intercontinental Harbor and prepared the fabrication for ready production in 2023 Q3. We see the challenges as opportunities to provide a new solution for the Taiwan market. With us being part of the local supply chain, we will reduce the need for vessels as we could deliver locally, and our 400-meter fabrication, it is planned to be set up for larger production with the new type equipment. Not just that, we've also prepared the manpower for production. With our experienced partner, Xingda and MRY, we know that talent are very crucial for a project to succeed. So we provide the welding class before our staffs go into the factory. We want to make sure that they know how to maintain our good quality for production. But most importantly is we want them to understand how to use the machine properly and make sure that safe is the first choice. The factory and the manpower are ready. So what is the next? The answer is a proper harbor. We invested in Kaohsiung's Intercontinental Port Phase 1 and Port 2. As we saw the advantage there, good weather conditions, less raining, deep water depth for the wharf, and a wider size of a hinterland. We plan to use that area for R&D, storage, assembly, and loading out harbor for installations. These preparations are ready for upscaling foundations together with upscaling turbines. We take the challenges as opportunities. Here's our contact details. You are more than welcome to contact us for further discussion. And now allow me to share this quote from COP27 last year with you together for implementation. So let's make the challenges become opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Lin, for the wonderful presentation. Please return to your seat. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Special Assistant of Chairman and Senior Vice President at Pacatron Corporation, Dr. Steve Huang. Welcome. Dr. Steve Huang will share his presentation on taking advantages of the innovative ICT industry. Please welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. This 15 minutes, I will target the topic from different angle. So please refresh your mind, your eyes. And I will talk about not official, but ICT. And the purpose to talk about this is ICT will going to provide a lot of value and help the offshore wind to grow bigger and healthy. One word to describe the company, Pacatron. We are the EMS company, the second largest one in Taiwan. We manufacture the iPhone for Apple, manufacture the car computer for Tesla car, and also the notebook for HP Dell. This is our company. Okay. This page tells you what is ICT, information and communication technology, industrial. But I like to use the easily understand words is computer and the mobile phone networking industrial. This industrial is influence user, consumer user that you and me more heavily. You cannot leave it. You use that every day. So the industry actually come from the semiconductor event. This back to the half century ago by North of Intel and Jack in TI. And the big event happened is three big things happened is IBM invent the PC in 81, that century. And the ARPANET, or this is a misspelling, ARPANET. ARPANET, this is the military networking, and they transfer and open to public user internet. And then Motorola released a mobile phone. And then the second stage, the big progress is Toshiba notebook PC. This is replaced IBM PC. So every day, everyone now, you don't use the desktop, you use the notebook. This is invented by the Toshiba. And Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. And then the internet more advanced and then become the IoT. So IoT and the AI is the most important technology today, and it will be helpful for every industrial, including offshore wind industrial. So after ICT became important last century, for the 30 years, ICT will there are many technologies, including IoT, AI, robot, AR, VR, 5G, EV, AV, electrical vehicle, and autonomous vehicle. Most important is the first two, IoT, AI. I'll use a few slides to introduce the importance. So what's the internet? What's the IoT? Internet of Things. This change the concept people use to control device. You like at home use a remote control to control your air condition, but actually you can use the internet to control your air condition or even your electrical vehicle car. So now today you can use iPhone to turn on your Tesla car, and you use the iPhone to turn on, turn off your air condition far away from you. Maybe you are in Taiwan, you can turn off your air conditioner in America. So this is expand the usage of device. And then, so this is a remote sensing. And remote sensing, second, so remote control is what I talked about just now. And remote sensing is we have to get status. So now this is special good for offshore wind because there's just an offshore, right? And everyone can be through internet to get all the status from there. You don't need to go to there to check the status of the devices or the construction you have. And also, IoT is important for providing big data connection and also even the communication between the device and device. And IoT is everywhere now in our life. Now, when we talk about the AI, I'd like to go back to review a little bit about the industrial generation. Actually, through these 2,000 years, we already go through 4 generations industrial. 18th century, there's industrial 1.1. We transfer from animal power to mechanical power. At the beginning, it's steaming power, and later, of course, it's streaming electricity power. So generation 2 is 2 things. We use electrical power and also have a concept of mass production. Generation 3, industrial 3.0, actually this is when we control the mass production or equipment, we use a reprogramming. So we don't need an operator to stand by the machine to push a button one by one. But you can write a program and control a whole process. And then what is the industrial 4.0? Actually, this is the red word say is cyber physical things using machine learning. This is a big topic. I think this week is a computer test. And Jason Huang from NVIDIA gave a very good talk yesterday, 2 days ago, and talk about AI so important. And you sure know the ChatGPT is so popular. So Industrial 4.0 is today, and people like to apply AI technology to help people to make decisions, easy decisions. You don't have human brain to decide every detail. You just made a big decision, and then machine made a simple decision for you. So this is the major difference 3.0 and the 4.0 industrial. Industrial 3.0 is a physical world controlled by conscious world is a human brain. But versus industrial 4.0 is a physical world and have a modeling and cyber world, and they use the modeling to make decisions and control it. And of course, the humans still control the cyber world, the AI. We don't want the robot to control human maybe a few years ago. That's why also a bit considerable among our CEO, a couple months ago, they started council say they don't want AI to go too fast without the legal control. That's another issue we'll talk about. And so this following 4 pages, I tell you, this is an example of the robot. Actually, we built in Picatron. Actually, I guided this project. So some few important technology: face recognition, object tracking, voice recognition, navigation. This is important technology, and they're going to use in not only mechanical, medical, industrial, or even the today topic, the offshore wind industrial. So this example robot we developed a few years ago, they can guiding you to the meeting room, and they become the security robot at the nighttime to protect you. This another generation, we build it even interesting one is like a human, right? And this is real, we build it, and we emphasize the technology is a 3D sensing capability. Is not only can walk on the floor, actually you have hands, right? You can pick up the apple, pick up the orange, and because he know the location in the 3D space. And he can speak with you because he can synthesize the human speech. And also, the last one STEM is he can work and simultaneously construct the map, like the sweeping robot in your home to clean your home, the same thing. So a few years ago, we already demoed he can use a 2 hand to help you to have a Coca-Cola, and you can have a force sensor, so you can pick up the strawberry without hurting the strawberry, and many things. Then I talk about VR. VR is also very important technology, virtual reality. And VR, AI is 2 things very close, but they are different. VR is immersive, so you cannot see through. And VR can help people do many things, including environment simulation or some training. This is a job the VR can provide you. Or so you can get a training first before you go into the real field to operate. AI is another thing. This is augmented reality. Like this guy, he may be called by company to go into the very complicated equipment facility room to fix something. But he don't have 100% knowledge. But the AI, they will pop up the information, message tell you how to do the next step and next step. So this is very useful. I think this will be used remotely. Like someone, maybe they operate in the offshore wind station, and in the control center, they can tell another information to help people to do everything you want. 5G is a big topic. Talk about, at the first page, I talk about the Motorola. They invent the mobile phone. That's the first generation mobile phone. 5G is important now. It's provide the biggest bandwidth and the more technology that the low latency and very massive the volume of the machine communication. So this is a special case of the 5G application. We call it 5G smart pole. If you got the time, you can go to the Taipei City Hall. There's three poles still there. There is a work for the smart city concept and try to protect people and try to provide you more convenient life in the city. So of course, they have a 5G small cell on the top of the pole. Also, they have lighting. They have a monitor, the camera. They have the billboard. They have air conditioning monitor, and provide everything to improve your life, daily life. So ICT industry, when he moving, actually he changed the world a lot. So it's important is the semiconductor computing power increase. You can see the NVIDIA chip, Qualcomm chip, Intel chip, they grows. The Moore's law, there's a proof. There's also driven by the ICT industry. And the mass production scale, we build, the world build 10 million mobile phones every year, more than 10 million mobile. So this is a help improve the mass production scale. Also the supply chain and to link supply chain in the world. And this supply chain build up very systematically can help people on that. Also, of course, he also help advance the electrical vehicle and the medical industry. I believe also in the future will advertise the innovation of the offshore wind industry. So this example, the ADAS. So now today, every time you drive a car, if in a dangerous situation, the car will push the brake for you to save your life. And they invent a lot of the camera, radar. This also comes from the normal PC and the mobile phone industry. Another one is wearable. So I like to emphasize for automobile industry and the medical industry, there's a more than century, 100-year industry, very old industry. They continue to do their way, but these 10 years, they influenced a lot by ICT. They take advantage of ICT industrial technology to build their device and make big progress. So this is a medical ring example, and also in healthy care, VR can help the medical training, the some treatment, and another like pain management and physical therapy to help people on that. AR, this is something, normally the surgeon, they have to watch the patient, also have to watch the monitor on the wall. This is a difficult thing for the operation. So the AR help them, they can see also through the AR to see what the camera inside the body show them. So actually, Taiwan, I like to promote a little bit about Taiwan. Taiwan wins a lot of things on the ICT industry. We produce 80% notebook in the world, and we manufacture almost 100% of iPhone for more than 10 years. And we actually help the world build up strong supply chain capability and Taiwan also have a good relationship with the chip vendor Intel, Qualcomm. Everybody need a chip, right? Including the offshore wind industry. So Taiwan have this capability. We have good relationship. We know how to deal with those chip vendor. Also, we have good capability, hardware, software, mechanical, RF, and we know how to scale out the mass production and for all industrial. So last page, I think ICT were going to contribute to offshore wind industrial. And another application, I don't want to spend much time there. You might maybe know more than me, but use our imagination and use our thinking. We can create better situation, environment for offshore wind industrial. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Huang, for sharing us with your very wonderful insights. Please return to your seat. And next, please welcome Chief Strategy Officer at Century Group, Mr. Vincent Lin. Mr. Lin will share his presentation on working with the current supply chain setup. Welcome. Please welcome Mr. Lin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Vincent Lin. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Century Group. We are a typical local supplier, but we are also facing some difficulty to find suppliers in Taiwan to meet our requirements. So today I would like to share you our experience and some lessons learned during these years. Some of you maybe know that we actually came from a construction company. So in the beginning, we are a building contractor. So we are construction for TSBC factory and the building for New Taipei City and also bridge. So that's our track records and where we came from. Then we step into the offshore wind in 2013. We fabricate offshore main mast. At that time, government is promoting offshore wind back to 10 years ago. At that time, the main mast, I think the QA/QC requirements and the HAC requirements is totally different from the standards we receive right now. So we thought that it was easy, but actually it's not. It costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of time. But we think that the offshore wind is definitely a good opportunity for us. So then after we delivered the main mast to Changhua, then we made a lot of visits to Europe after 2013. We see a lot of factory. We're looking for partners. We try to have some lessons learned, and we want to know what the real situation of offshore wind in Europe. So when we came back, we make a decision, very bold decision, that we rent an area in 2017 in Taipei Harbor. Then we build up our factory in Taipei Harbor. So right now we are already delivered several projects, and the several projects ongoing, and the several projects are coming in coming years in the very near future. This page shows the location of our own directly owned factories in Taiwan from north to south. So in the beginning, our mother company is Century Steel, located in Guanyin. The second one from north, the city, Guanyin. Then we invest Taipei Harbor in 2017 for Century Wind Power. So actually in Taipei Harbor, we are utilizing actuators for Taipei Harbor only. The main purpose of in the main scope of the Taipei Harbor for Century Wind Power is the jacket assembly and the loadout. Because you know the jacket right now is huge, 1,300 tons right now. And there will be 2,000 tons in coming years, even more, even bigger. And we are also considering the floaters in the future. In coming 3 or 5 years, definitely you will need a very good harbors. So hereby I also echo what Professor Mars said yesterday. We definitely need a suitable harbor, not only for floater, but also for turbine assembly, installation, and also for the mooring, and also for the storage. No matter it's a dry storage or wet storage, it will cost a lot. But the government needs to move fast, otherwise we will not catch up the trend of the offshore wind, floating offshore wind development in the world. Then the second one is our Guanyin Yacht, our mother company. So because it's an inland factory, 30 hectares, but because the components simply too big. So we need to fabricate the components in Guanyin Yard and transport by truck to Taipei Harbor to assemble all the components into one jacket. Then we invest our Huaxin area in Taichung. We have 30 hectares over there. So the main purpose in the beginning is for tower fabrication. So we have a team up with a kind of collaboration with Welcome in Denmark. So we are trying and we are planning to set up the tower production line in the future. So I think will be in production maybe next year. And also for pin piles and the tubular. So the main purpose and the main scope of our Taichung Harbor will be the tubular fabrication in Taichung. And one of the most important scope right now is to fabricate the small diameter pipes for jacket, because every pipes under 1.2 meters is difficult to fabricate. So Taiwan, we need to have our own production line for the smaller pipe. So now the most important scope of the Taichung Harbor is for small pipe fabrication. And then we have city in Yunlin. We have also one factory, 10 hectares in Yunlin Yard. That's also provide the components for our jackets. Actually, the Yunlin Yard was actually for the steel construction for buildings, but it's difficult to find the sufficient supplies. So we need to convert our own yard from steel structure, from construction into offshore wind. So we sacrifice a lot because in this year, the building construction, the money, the cost, the contract price is very good for building, but we have to convert into the offshore wind. This slide shows the current stages of our old factories. The up left is our Taipei Harbor. You can see we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and also painting shop. The height of phase 1 is 56 meters. The height of phase 3 is 106 meters. And we have a very luxury painting shop. The length is 150. Height is 40 meters, width is 40 meters, with humidity and temperature control for the painting, because we know the painting quality is crucial for the offshore foundations. So we spend a lot on all these things in Taipei Harbor. So up right is our Taichung Yard. That's for pin pile for tubular fabrication right now. And down right is our Guanyin Yard and Yunlin Yard. So the down left is our pictures taken in Taipei Harbor. So you can see many jackets and pin piles are waiting for loadout. And you can see our most kind of unique assembly methodology for jacket assembly is we assemble all the jackets within the door, under the roof. So it's kind of probably the first factory that assemble the jacket under the roof, because all in all, we try to save the cost. Because we see a lot of factories in Europe or in other countries, they are utilizing the current kind of the crane or crawler crane, but we think it will cost a lot. And in Taipei Harbor, we have weather issues. We have rain, we have windy weather. So we have to put our welders in a very safe conditions. So we put our elevator in our indoor yard, so they can take an elevator onto the top, onto the 75 meters. So instead of climbing up to 75 meters, so they have elevators and we have the catwalks. And most important, we put the cheaper over crane on top, 800 tons for each hose. So you simply save a lot of cost on crane. Otherwise, we need to spend hundreds of millions to rent the crane annually, and save a lot of money and the time to do the stake folding. It's also very cost scope for the fabrication. This page shows our Taipei Harbor development process in passing few years. So in the first beginning in 2017, we invest to acquire the land in Taipei Harbor. Somebody told our chairman that he made a kind of stupid or very bold or too aggressive decision at that time, because the picture you see right here, upright, is the picture taken at low tide only at low tide you can see the land. In high tide you see nothing. You see nothing, definitely see nothing. But we made a decision. At that time we didn't have any firm order, or we didn't even know or realize the determination of government, whether the offshore wind will fly or not. But we still made the decision to rent the land, but starting from small, starting from 5 hectares, not 8 hectares right now. But as a private company, once we made a bad decision, we lost our all companies. So we have to do it very carefully. So we plan for the worst. If the offshore wind did not fly, we'll change our land into a logistic to make a warehouse to have the storage like a steel plate. So we have to plan the worst for in case our company lose everything. Then upright, we starting to do the facility building 2019. At that time, in the beginning, we only planned 30 hectares, 1 building, only phase 1, for our jacket foundation fabrication. But right now, you see on the down left, the current status in Taipei Harbor, we are having 80 hectares, phase 1, phase 3, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and the painting house. So everything doesn't follow our plan. So everything changed. Why we do this? Why we spend a lot of money and a lot of time for this? Because simply, we cannot find sufficient suppliers in Taiwan. And we also have a pressure. We need to deliver our product to our employer on time. So we have to spend a lot of money. We have to involving ourselves to cut the cost, to save the cost. So somebody will ask why you spend the money to cut the cost. Because eventually we found that the most easy way or the most rightful way to cut the cost is to enhancing your capacity, to enhancing your productivity, to reduce the unit cost. I think that's the most important and the smart way to do that. So even now, we are involving ourselves. We are still expanding to cut the cost. Only if we build our own supply chain or if we build our own production capacity, then we have the bargaining power to discussion with our suppliers. Otherwise, we'll also be choked by our suppliers. So the down right is the future plan in the future, because the jacket will be getting bigger, about 90 meters in coming years, and we also see the floating offshore wind in the future. So you can see the yellow part over there. We are actually considering to rent another 100 hectares for floaters, and we definitely know the supply chain for floater is totally different for the fixed bottom jacket. So we are planning right now, and we are getting a resource for that. This part shows the main product of our factory, what we are doing right now. Jacket, pin piles. So you can see everything starts from supply chains. We need to assemble, we need to collect every components from our suppliers. Essentially, we cannot do everything by ourselves. We need to cooperate with suppliers. So starting from the CCO, you can see the left up, the smaller pipe fabrication. That's the production line I mentioned in our Taichung yard. We spent almost $1 billion to have this production line running for diameter under 1.2 meters. And we spend a lot of money for the rolling machine. In our group, we have more than 10 rolling machines within our group. We have to make by ourselves to catch up the production requirement in the future. Then you see cans and the sections. We need to have our suppliers ready to provide us with cans and sections for us to assemble all the jackets into one pieces. So we assemble the jacket from 1D, 2D, then 3D, then piece by piece. Lower jacket, upper jacket, then TP, then into one total jacket. So right now we are kind of overcome some kind of the technical, the bottleneck. So right now we can reach the capacity 4 jackets per month right now. So we are kind of meet the standard, international standard, but it's a very painful progress and a painful the day we have passed, we have been through, and definitely a very expensive and costly one. This is my last slide that shows my suggestion or my idea of the key elements to being a part of the supply chain. What kind of elements will be required in our opinion? The first one, of course, is the determination. You have to have your determination to devote yourself into this industry. Otherwise, you don't have patience. If you don't have patience, you cannot do anything. So you can see the picture over there. That's my friend. She flew from Taiwan to elsewhere. So it take the picture from the airplane. So everybody, if you leave Taiwan in coming days, you will see our picture right now. You can see our jackets are ready for loadout. The installation are there with 4 jackets on the vessel ready for installation, waiting for this typhoon passing by. So starting from nothing, we always remember that back to 2017 that only in the low tide you see the land, but right now we see it's well, I would not say it is a kind of successful things, but it's a kind of milestone. Without determination, we cannot reach this part. And the next 2 parts is the financial soundness and the human resource. I think sometimes we feel lucky that because our mother company, we are a publicly listed company. So bank, they are willing or they are kind of comfortable to lend us the money to invest. And we have our technical team to support our fabrication works, because they're kind of backbone for all the fabrication. If we don't have anything, we don't have anyone, so it's difficult to be a qualified supply chain. But right now, I also need to echo what Intercontinental said, that human resource is definitely a bottleneck in the future. So we also think about long term. So some of you maybe heard that our chairman also bought a school to incubate our welders and our technicians by ourselves for long term. And the next part, the 4th part, is clear market outlook and forecast. Back to 10 years ago, there was no. We don't have the clear market or forecast a lot of time. But right now, we see a very clear market requirement in the future globally. But it also worries us a lot, because it means that Taiwan will also facing the competition with other countries to compete for the limited development resources in the future. So some developers or OEM suppliers, they will go to other countries, but not in Taiwan. So it's something we have to start. So we change ourselves a little bit. So we are considering, of course, Taiwan is still our priority market in the future, but we are thinking about to step into the market regionally. So we are putting ourselves as a global supply chain, one of the global supply chain in the future. So actually, we receiving some invitation from other continentals asking us to do some investment or to set up a factory for other wind farms in the country. So we do really think about this, because we think a regional supply chain to support each other will be very good. It will be also a way to cost down. I think that's very important. Finally, is the strategic development roadmap. You have to be a supplier, successful supplier, you have to put yourself as a global supplier, not only a local supplier. Because only cutting your cost to meet the requirement of the employer, that will make a project fly. Otherwise, you're stuck in Taiwan. So if deploy simply to think the Taiwan market is too difficult for them, they will change to other markets. So you have to put your shoes into your developers. Of course, it's difficult for the developers in Taiwan, because you have to spend a lot of money in the beginning, but with a reasonable profit in the beginning, you have to think in the future, you need to gain more. You can gain more in the future. So it's kind of long-term partnership in the future, because it's a small world. I think we'll see each other in every conference in the world in coming years. That's a small world. Build up a long-term partnership is very important. So have a strategic development roadmap is very important to being a global supply chain in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lin, for your presentation. Please return to your seat. And next, I'd like to invite Head of Construction at Siemens Gamesa Offshore for Asia Pacific, Mr. John Collier. Welcome. Mr. Collier will share his presentation on a sustainable supply chain setup strategic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Okay, good morning. Everybody can hear me, I guess. That's good. Good. Right. So, a little bit about maybe an introduction first. So I'm John Collier, Head of Construction for Siemens Gamesa. In the Siemens world, Head of Construction means that I'm responsible for the onshore pre-assembly and installation works, offshore installation works and commissioning works for the company in APAC, and also the enabling services for that, which of course has quite a significant supply chain, and it's rather crucial that that supply chain is sustained in Taiwan and also flexed and grown across the market and globally. There are three core areas where we are looking to establish and maintain that supply chain. That would be in our own core manufacturing. We have a nacelle plant that's being constructed. That's also around developing a local and regional supply chain for that factory and that Siemens manufacturing. And it's also on the offshore side, around making sure that we have the right supply chain to support our activities across pre-assembly, installation, commissioning, and service. In terms of the nacelle plant, then actually the current plant is well on the way in its construction. It's moved a lot. It's now, I think, over 35% complete and ahead of schedule. I think the start of production should be in the first half of next year, which is something we're really looking forward to, and that will build our next generation of turbines. It should be capable of at least 2 gigawatts of output a year, which of course is very good for the Taiwan market and gives an opportunity for export as well. In terms of sustainability, it's quite important to recognize that that is the second nacelle plant that we are constructing. It's actually an extension of the first, which was used to assemble 75 nacelles for the Greater Changhua project. What's sustainable about that? Well, apart from the fact that we're reutilizing the same land and the same building, the employees who assembled those nacelles are currently mainly in Europe, and they're in Denmark and they're in Germany, and they're learning how to construct and assemble the next generation of nacelle. So those employees who joined us quite a few years ago are then staying with us. They're helping us develop, and they will bring on the new employees, of which there are quite a few hundred that will join us. In terms of that particular factory, we have a range of suppliers, some in Taichung, some in Kaohsiung. The one that we would highlight is Yonggang Group, who are a supplier to us outside of Taiwan as well, but they have a factory co-located right next door in Taichung. And we expect that throughout the lifetime of that factory, there'll be tens of thousands of tons of castings that will come a very, very short distance. So, of course, that's one benefit of localization. The transport and the logistics can sometimes be made more simple. The other huge benefit to Taiwan of that, of course, is that it will create, in combination, over 1,000 local jobs, direct jobs in Taichung, which of course is one of the purposes of the offshore wind industry. In the offshore side, then ultimately we start to look less at parts and a lot more at services. And in terms of services, the critical thing there is that we set the standard, we get the right standards, we upskill and work with our partners in Taiwan and the region to be able to do what needs to be done, because of course time and quality is so critical in this industry. So Taiwan, it's very much the first of the emerging markets in the region. It's absolutely crucial that the Taiwan market stays healthy, because that's where the capability will grow from. We already see a local supply chain emerging, we see it maturing, and it's really important that that home market sustains those companies and those jobs and those people. The next stage, of course, is the wider APAC market, and as that emerges and that matures, that provides opportunities for growth, it provides opportunities for risk management, and of course, it increases competition and it drives down costs. So really, the item from this slide that I would highlight is Taiwan has to stay strong and to fully realize the opportunities of localization, there has to be a regional APAC market. What I'd like to do now is just deep dive into one of our projects, offshore projects, Formosa 2. And I'll commit the cardinal sin. I'll start with the strapline. Before we came here, we had a look at how many local companies we had used in Formosa 2. And the answer was over 200. And they were companies across the value chain. So everything from small stuff such as hand tools, PPE, small maintenance equipment, through to services such as office build, office demobilization, through to critical services such as the movement and lifting and ground transport of heavy main components. So really a series of supply chain across the board through into service and our own offshore works in terms of vessel suppliers. Mainly focused on SOV, CTV transfers. So what does that prove? In my opinion, it proves that if you have a local market, if you have business, if you have projects, localization will come. I think that's something that's been proved elsewhere in the globe, with the UK, for example, which is the largest market outside of the People's Republic of China. As long as there is a market, as long as there is some stability, as long as there is confidence, then businesses will, get created. They will thrive. They will take advantage of the opportunities. The flip side of that, of course, is making sure that the right type of localization is enabled. Because if the opportunity is there, localization will come. I would say just be careful around forcing localization where it doesn't make sense. So for me, this is quite fantastic. It really shows the level to which Taiwan is able to support the offshore wind industry and has grown in a very short time. So I'd like to pull some examples now from across the projects that we've been involved in over the last few years. So the first one I'd pick on is TIPH as a supplier. They undertook an activity for us, which many people said was horrible and couldn't be done. Of course, we didn't believe them. But TIPH, together with their partner Mammoet, actually made sure that we could move the 75 nacelles that we assembled in Taichung from Industrial Zone 2 through to Key 36, which was the pre-assembly and staging harbour. It was actually 76 that were moved, but we won't pick on too many details. And why was that important? It was important because it covered the whole value chain of moving. At times there was some lifting involved. We had to do the ground transport. We had to move things onto a barge. And all I can say is that at the start, moving a nacelle from one side of Taichung port to another, which is about a nautical mile, in some ways seemed more complicated than moving a nacelle from a factory in Germany to Taichung. But maybe that just illustrates the development that can happen in places like Taiwan, because by the end, what are we doing? We're building another factory. Look at where the pre-assembly harbours are. They're the other side of the port, largely. So it can't be that bad. The other one, 7-Star, now, they work directly for us in some capacities. Sometimes they work with their partner, BMS. They're a stevedoring company. They do lifting, loading, unloading operations, a lot of ground transport as well. I think they're a great example of a company that has come in, has embraced the standards that we require as an industry in terms of quality and health and safety. And as you can see from the slide, they've worked across all our projects and undertaken, a lot of activities. So one of the things that always makes me bristle personally is when I hear that activities in APAC, for example, might be less safe or have less quality than activities elsewhere in Europe, because you actually get a range of capabilities everywhere. And I think what we've seen in Taiwan is that with the right approach as a company, with the right suppliers, you can deliver good or sometimes even better results than you can in the so-called mature markets. In terms of the vessel space, then of course you have DFO or Dongfang Offshore, who are, I think, the most local of all the vessel operators. They provide walk-to-work vessels and they provide CTVs into the developers, also directly into us as an OEM and an installer. At the moment, we've got some of our commissioning teams and high voltage teams on one of their vessels on the Greater Changhua project. And we've been engaged with them directly for quite a long time on Formosa 2, where over the course of about a 10-month period, they managed to transfer almost 3,500 personnel for us safely and as we needed. Then the last case study I would pick up on is a little bit different because it's obviously not a core Taiwanese company, but that's Fairwind, and they've supported us on a few projects over here in Taiwan. And why would I pick on this? It's because actually they've also demonstrated a very strong commitment to generating local capability and local content in terms of the employees that Fairwind send to help us pre-assemble our towers. Then 43% of those have been Taiwanese. And that's something that Fairwind and ourselves looked at very early on in the engagement, and we agreed that this would be a target. And this isn't a target that's incentivized by the government or otherwise mandated. It simply makes sense because where you have a market, you want to have co-location of competent people, supply chain, everything else. So I think that one's also a success story. It shows how a global company can come and really effectively localize and contribute to the regional industry and also the industry in Taiwan. So I think this is my last slide because those who know me know I'm very succinct and don't talk much. But what we need to do now is we need to look forward. And I'll reiterate, the key thing is that we keep the Taiwan market healthy because that will provide the platform and sustain the local supply chain. And then we need to grow that into the newer and emerging markets, such as, for example, Japan, such as the Republic of Korea. And of course, we all know that there are noises from Australia, the Philippines, Vietnam, so on and so forth. What does this mean for Taiwan? Well, the first thing actually, and possibly in my opinion, the most important thing about growing localization is you grow the lodestar or the center of competence in a certain area. So what we have now across the industry, and certainly within Siemens Gamesa, is a lot of professional talent who are growing in the industry. They're becoming experts, and they are going elsewhere. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a group of our Taiwanese technicians who are currently in Japan supporting the Ishikari project. That's a great example of the industry and localization because that would have been simply impossible when you had 2019 and Formosa 1. So that shows the growth, that shows the importance of collaboration across the different markets. As I said in Japan last week, at the moment it's the Taiwanese guys who are coming to Japan and working with the guys there. And hopefully in future, it might be the guys from Japan who are going to Korea and seeding the growth of that market. So it's about developing skills, and it's about being able to execute productively with those skills. Then, of course, in terms of a wider regional market, you have some fantastic opportunities. We just picked one, utilization of big specialist equipment. It, of course, makes huge sense to be able to utilize that across the APAC market rather than have a market, for example, in Europe, and then Taiwan as a bolt-on. I'm sure you can imagine that shipping a yoke that weighs many tons from Esbjerg Harbour to Taichung doesn't make as much sense as being able to move that from Taichung to Ishikari Port, for example. And then, of course, you've got the other one, which is managing the demand for the manufacturing setup, equally for the project and personnel setup. We all exist in a project business. That means you have peaks, that means you have troughs, and with a wider market, then you've got the ability to manage that, and that lends itself naturally to sustainability. So, time's up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Collier, for the wonderful presentation. And next, please welcome Vice President for Taiwan Vestas Asia Pacific, Mr. Alex Robertson. Mr. Robertson will be sharing his presentation on building a supply chain for Asia Pacific. Please welcome Mr. Robertson.
Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Hi, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. It was nice to see that TIPH is a praiseworthy story from localization. John, I think that's, if you can turn that relationship around, then that's a great success. Although I did notice that New Zealand is missing from your map. Has New Zealand done something to offend Siemens Gamesa? Is that? You can maybe tell me later. Well, I guess it's maybe not the biggest offshore market in the foreseeable future. Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Alex from Vestas, and I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about supply chain in Taiwan, and particularly the prospect of export and how important that is for creating a sustainable supply chain. There's one thing that Taiwan's offshore industry has successfully exported already to Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, amongst other places. Any ideas what that might be? Yes, well, it is the export. We have exported the dangerous idea that strict local content rules are a good thing. And that has very much been, one person enjoyed that joke. But the thing about these local content rules is they come, but they also go. And we saw that, whereas most Asian countries have looked at Taiwan and been impressed and said, oh, maybe we can copy that. There's been changes in Japan after the first auction. Korea has dramatically watered down their local content requirements, and so far things are not moving that way in Vietnam. So, we've seen it across the world, also in onshore. Local content regulations come and then they go. Factories get built and then they get closed. And my message starting today's presentation is, the clock is ticking. We have a few years to get this supply chain to be competitive and sustainable, because it is just a matter of time before the local content rules in Taiwan are also abandoned or heavily watered down. And if we don't want to just add Taiwan to the list of kind of failed local content experiments, then we've got to get export competitive. Suppliers and the supply chain cannot rely on a protected local market if we want to create something. And speaking for Vestas, we put an incredible amount of effort into localization, as you'll see on the coming slides. And I personally would really like that effort to last, let's say, a generation at least. I would really like to visit Taiwan, maybe with my grandkids, and see factories and suppliers that have grown and developed that were all started during this period of time. So I think we have, as an industry, we really have a joint interest in creating something sustainable here. And there's no such thing as a sustainable local supply chain. It needs to be an export-driven supply chain. I won't spend too much time talking about Vestas. This is a photo of our V174 turbine, first one that we installed last year in Taiwan. It's the largest offshore wind turbine in the Asia Pacific region outside China, and it will stay that way until we temporarily hand over that crown to our friends at Siemens Gamesa, but then we'll take that back from them in 2027 when we install the 15 megawatt turbine. But, pass the baton back and forth. Here are some facts and figures about Vestas, but I think you're relatively familiar with the company. This is a little bit about our Asia footprint. We're building up quite a pipeline of projects in Asia. We've got some projects that we're building in Japan. We've completed Akita Nishiro, and we're starting construction on Hibikinada. We've got obviously the 1.2 gigawatt localized portfolio in Taiwan with the 174, and then the 15 megawatt projects in the pipeline, and then in South Korea, we've made some big announcements of both floating and fixed bottom preferred supplier agreements. There's a bit of a different, one of the things about the way Vestas is set up is our offshore business is organized regionally. So my boss, the president of Asia Pacific, he is responsible for onshore and offshore in the Asia Pacific region. Now, why does this matter? It's just a boring org chart topic, not something you would normally mention at a conference. It matters because right now, honestly, I think the rational thing to do would be to pretty much pause activities in Asia and focus on the European and maybe American markets, because that's where stuff is moving forward. The projects are relatively simple compared to here. It's safe money. And Asia's difficult. Taiwan is difficult, Japan is difficult, Korea is difficult. Well, we don't have that luxury at Vestas. Our job, my job, the job of my boss is to make a success of Asian offshore. So I think there's a macroscopic trend that we're seeing in the market, that there is a real shift of focus away from Asia towards Europe, from all kinds of people in the supply chain, but also on the customer side. And that is a luxury that Vestas doesn't have. We're here to make a success of this region, and we have every intention of doing that. And that's what I think is shown in this pipeline of projects that we're building. Many of you will have seen this slide before. It's now expanded with 2 additional suppliers because it includes our round 3 supply base. We spent an awful lot of energy and engineering resources and procurement and supplier development resources on developing these suppliers. Almost all of these suppliers are producing their first components for the Vestas V174. So all of that knowledge transfer, all of the teething pains of entering into the offshore supply chain for the first time is stuff we're working through together with our suppliers. And we're very pleased that that YGG, very topical supplier at the moment, are finishing off their first castings for the 174 as we speak. But it's a really big supply chain, but it's also a lot of suppliers. We're looking here at 10 component suppliers for our V174 and V236. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, because, spoiler alert, I think it's too many. The 236, just to get like a sense of scale, it's very easy just to look at numbers on a paper: 236, 174, 222, 9.5, 15 megawatts. I mean, it's just a bit bigger. This machine is not just a bit bigger. It's absolutely enormous. This is our platform for the future. So it's a really massive step up in size. I think this image really captures it. And everything about building, manufacturing, transporting, and installing this machine is extremely difficult. And it is on the absolute edge of the logistic capabilities of the industry. So what we're trying to do, build up this supply chain in Taiwan for this behemoth machine, is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult in Europe, where there's 30 years of track record, but it's even more difficult in Taiwan, where there's maybe 5 years. I just included this image because I think it's pretty cool, but that's why I had to make some content around it to justify it. Okay. Of course, I want to talk a little bit about our effort on the blades side of things. It's been very difficult producing blades in Taiwan for many reasons. But most of all, it's been the challenges around producing blades is a skill. You have a work instruction, you can study the work instruction, and you can still completely fail to get a quality blade off the production line. It requires so much expertise, so much knowledge transfer, so much. I think, Angelica, you described it in your article as artisanal, or is it artisanal? I don't know. Artisanal. And it is, it's like, it really is difficult. And these things have got to spin for, 25 plus years in the most difficult environment in the world, probably one of the most difficult environments in the world. And it's very tough to build to the quality that we need. And one thing I would say, and I think I would echo this from what John said about Siemens, is we don't, there is no, the standard of quality and safety that we expect in Taiwan and that we deliver in Taiwan is exactly the same as everywhere else in the world. So the finished product has to be absolutely up to scratch. And as a result, it's taken a very long time and a huge amount of resources. I mention this just because, and I think this is true for all of the major suppliers active in Taiwan throughout the value chain. It's a huge amount of work. None of this is easy. It takes an enormous amount of investment and focus to get this stuff off the ground, and it is a really big achievement when it's done. So all the more important that we find a way to make it long-term sustainable and competitive. So this is kind of how we view what's going on in Taiwan in the supply chain. So we currently have a lot of suppliers, some big, some small, some doing a great job, others less so. And that comes out of the fact that the original localization policy was based on the idea of trying to manufacture as much of the turbine as possible. I think the starting point when the policy was developed was, let's produce the entire turbine in Taiwan. And then gradually, one by one, components were taken out of that scope, and we're left with what we have today. Where do we want to be? I think, pick a date, by 2030, if there are 4 top quality, export competitive suppliers or components being manufactured for the turbine in Taiwan, that would be a fantastic success. And that's kind of the journey we want to take. We want to gradually shift from trying to do everything to try and do a little bit less, but do that really well and do it competitively and do it with a focus on export. And I think, the comparison of where we are today to tomorrow, you can see what we've written on the slide. The localization is policy driven, so a lot of suppliers, are doing this just to fulfill the policy, and we want to change that to export driven. It's often very expensive. We want to make that competitive. It's often only subcomponents, and we only want to really do full components. And an example here is that in Taiwan, we produce the coils for the transformer in the turbine, and then we send it to Europe, make it into a transformer, send it back to Taiwan, finish it off in into a finished product. And actually right now, there's kind of a global shortage of transformers. So we would quite like to be able to source transformers in Taiwan. That would be advantageous for the industry. But there is no supplier in Taiwan that can do transformers. There's just a supplier that can do a subcomponent of the transformer. And that isn't creating value, that isn't expanding and scaling up offshore wind, that's just creating absurd supply chains where you ship components halfway around the world 3 times. So yeah, from kind of unnatural subcomponent-based localization, it should be proper, full component-wise localization. And then, from this local focus to the global ambition. And that's really what we want to see, and I think that the journey that the policy needs to go on and that we want to go on with our suppliers is gradually letting some of them maybe realize that offshore wind wasn't exactly what they wanted to do and focus on the ones that are really passionate about making a successful business. I think that's all I had to say. I'll give a minute back to my next speaker. So thank you very much and looking forward to collaboration in future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson, for the presentation. And next, please welcome Global Head of ABC and Compliance, Coriol, Mr. Ken Gazaway. Mr. Gazaway will be sharing his presentation on safe harbors towards a common compliance framework for offshore wind. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Gazaway.
Good morning. So I'd like to first introduce myself, and thanks to the WFO for organizing the event, and thank you all for attending. So I'm Ken Gazaway. I am the Global Head of Anti-Bribery and Corruption and Compliance for Koryo Generation. I joined just to manage ABC initially, and over time that's evolved into ABC sanctions, money laundering, fraud, data protection, competition law, so anything compliance related. And there's a good reason for that, and that's because everything's kind of interlinked. I'll tell you two things about myself that kind of set the scene for the way that I approach compliance and how it is relevant to management of the supply chain for offshore wind. First, I spent over 8 years as a naval intelligence officer in the US Navy, so I'm a naturally suspicious and questioning kind of person, very helpful in the compliance area. And I also spent over 10 years in private practice in the States as a white-collar criminal defense attorney, representing companies, financial institutions, in cross-border investigations, all manner, ABC investigations, obviously, but also sanctions investigations, fraud, securities. All of my clients were entirely innocent, and the government was barking up the wrong tree. But it gave me a very good insight into how businesses actually operate and how you can get in trouble, and also, consequently, how to avoid getting into trouble. So I approach compliance from a suspicious mind, trust but verify, but also ensuring that operations and business can succeed. So those things are often in tension with one another. So I do want to talk about two key points. One, why do we care about compliance from an offshore wind perspective? And then what do we do about it? So why it matters, practically everything that we do in the offshore wind space has some compliance touch point, some compliance risk associated with it. Whether you're bidding in the market, engaging the supply chain, or all the way through construction and operation. Every aspect of our business involves some degree of compliance risk. And how we manage that risk is important because we are still a relatively nascent industry, and our reputation as an industry can be significantly impacted by even minor events that are compliance related. So it inures to all of our benefit to have a standard baseline in how we approach compliance issues. We talked yesterday a bit about the fact that we can no longer just rely on the tier 1 suppliers. We're going to have to bring people along the tier 2, the tier 3, however many tiers you want to go down. And it's something that I think we've heard this morning, that it's important that we do engage the local suppliers and get them more involved. I have a quick story that I want to tell from the beginning of the pandemic. At the time of the pandemic, I was the regional head of anti-bribery and corruption for MUFG Bank. So I also have kind of a financier's mind to these things. And we had clients that suddenly could not do anything because of the pandemic. And there was an old book came out in the early 90s called Who Moved My Cheese? About the adaptability of business. And the great example that I came up with, or that came to me, in fact, we had a manufacturer that we had been providing finance for. And they made engines for F1, Formula One race cars. Obviously, during the pandemic, there were no Formula One races. They sat idle. They had nothing to do. But they realized, we make motors. Motors turn. Right now, we can't make those motors. But the same idea of what goes into a motor powers ventilators. And ventilators were in a high demand at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Countries could not get enough of the ventilators they needed. And so this manufacturer converted their factory into medical devices something they had never dealt with before because they made Formula One race cars. And that adaptability was great, except now it brought a whole new set of compliance risks. And for us in the offshore wind business, we have a supply chain that may not necessarily know offshore wind. They don't know exactly how to manufacture a nacelle. They don't know all of the supply parts that are needed for that. But there are loads of suppliers that can do the same thing as what we saw the Formula One race car engine manufacturer do, and adapt their existing facilities to help support the offshore wind market. So that we can, although I certainly worry about localization requirements changing, in order to build sustainable supply chains, you do need to have local resources. I spent a lot of time on this slide, but it is important to realize that we do have significant touch points when it comes to compliance risk across the entire value chain, and it's up to us to try and bring people along. Why do we care about compliance? This is my pitch for, this is important. It's not just something that has to be done on paper. The IMF estimates that there are trillions of dollars in bribes paid every year. And that's trillions of dollars that aren't going into local economies, aren't improving people's lives. And it's not just a financial crime. Bribery and corruption actually results in deaths. And I'm not exaggerating. There are people who have died because of bribery and corruption. I give two examples: a bridge collapse in Italy because they had bribed their way into getting the contract to use substandard materials. 43 people died. And in 2017, there was an earthquake in Mexico City. This followed on from an earlier earthquake where they had substantially increased the standards, the health and safety requirements for their buildings. But over time, the safety inspectors were taking bribes, and substandard buildings were then constructed, and over 40 buildings collapsed, killing hundreds. So bribery and corruption isn't just something that we care about because, hey, the compliance guy is making you do it. We care about it because it actually can impact people's lives. Costs lots of money when there are ABC enforcement actions or other compliance-related actions. It can cost billions of dollars in penalties. None of those involve offshore wind. Good. We want to keep it that way. But beyond just the penalties, a company or an industry can basically collapse for reasons of an investigation beyond the penalties. It takes years for these investigations to work their way through. And during that time, that's years of time that your people are not doing their day jobs. They're dealing with people like me, sitting in a room, preparing for interviews with government investigators, and trust me, it's not fun. I mean, as much fun as it is to spend time with me, it's not so much fun spending time with people in the government. And that's just lost time. And your reputation will take a significant hit. And so oftentimes, companies' reputations can take years to recover, if they recover at all. People won't want to do business with you. Our industry as a whole can suffer. Financiers may say, offshore wind has a risk of corruption. We've seen it at a couple of places. We don't want to deal with that right now. And so we can all suffer because compliance wasn't taken seriously. And then, of course, there's the human element, staff morale. People will leave a company if they're not happy. And even then, they may have a hard time finding jobs elsewhere because people don't want to be associated with somebody that's affiliated with a company that's tainted. But compliance is often not viewed as the colleague, the friend, the facilitator. I think people tend to think of compliance as the roadblocks, the people that stand in the way of progress. And that's because, generally speaking, people think of compliance as the programs that were written that have all these restrictions, these rules. These say you cannot do this, you cannot do that, instead of here's how you do what you want to do, but do it safely. That's because a lot of the compliance programs were structured based on reactive measures rather than being proactive. My mantra when it comes to compliance is, how do I get to yes? If we can get to yes safely and reasonably, identify the risk, mitigate the risk, identify what that residual risk is, and can we have sufficient controls in place to manage it, then we can proceed. That's the whole goal, because at the end of the day, let's be realistic, I'm overhead. I don't make money for the business, and I know that. But I need the business to succeed, and I'm dedicated to ensuring that not only Choreo, but the entire industry can succeed. And if we do that, then of course, then people make money, and hey, my overhead is paid for, as is my daughter's education. So thank you. So I think that it's important that we understand there's a need for compliance, and that it actually inures to the benefit of everybody, not just our own companies, but everybody up and down the supply chain. There are globally consistent standards that are set forth by guidance from the DOJ, the US Department of Justice and Securities Exchange Commission, as well as the UK Ministry of Justice, that set forth what the expectations are. But those are very broad-based, and they don't really give you a whole lot of detail, but that's an opportunity for us. So, there's a laser pointer. So what do we do about all this? What I suggest and what I propose is that we as an industry have a model. And it's a very simple model. I mentioned yesterday that at the outset, when I engage a counterparty, I have a standard due diligence questionnaire that I send. I think that we should all have a standard template approach to compliance. There's going to be a lot of detail on the slides about what I and explaining every box on this. The slides are available if you ask WFO, they'll be more than happy to provide them. But I think that we have an opportunity as an industry. When we're talking about bringing along people who are not used to the offshore wind market, people who are not used to dealing with international players and suppliers who don't even know what bankability means and why we care about what the big global banks are looking for, it's important that we tell them, this is what we expect, this is what we stand for, this is who we are. And that starts with a basic framework. And the frameworks can be modeled on whatever documents you want, as long as we set forth the same ideas. We have principles that we all share. And you tailor those principles to the size and scope of your operations or the operations of people further down the supply chain. So I'll quickly walk through what I propose to be kind of the basic framework, starting with the code of conduct. At the end of the day, we are people. All of our business is done through us as individuals. Our suppliers are people. It's nice to see corporations and the names of all the companies, but at the end of the day, I like seeing people because that's who makes this industry work. And there's nothing more important to impress upon people how they should behave than by having a code of conduct, a standard that sets the baseline. It's a very high-level document that just says, here's who we are, here's what we stand for, and here are the basic principles that we expect everyone who works for us to adhere to. As long as we communicate that clearly and effectively to our own staff and to others that we work with, that helps to inculcate that idea into the supply chain and bring people up to the same standard. High-level position statements on a broad range of topics, and it can be a very simple document. It doesn't have to, hours, by no means claim that it's the perfect model, but it's only 6 pages, which is, I think, a little bit too long. You can succinctly say who you are and what you stand for in a few pages while putting out into the market that position and what you stand for. Underneath that, I have an ABC policy. Depending on the size of the company, you may collapse the code of conduct and the ABC policy, but to me, an ABC policy is that, setting forth your zero tolerance for bribery and corruption, and that establishes that you do have baseline controls to manage corruption risk. And there are different procedures underneath those to explain how those controls operate, but the ABC policy says, here's what we stand for, here's how the controls are actually going to work. In practice, you give the detail in the procedure itself. I emphasize that there should be training, and that training needs to be tailored. That training should include your supply chain. The people that you work with, if they aren't really familiar with how you manage ABC risk or any other compliance risk, bring them along, train them, because the only way we can expect people to really understand what we are expecting of them as individuals is to bring them along and teach them, work with them. They are our partners for a reason. They're not just people who serve us. We work together. Third-party due diligence is what we're all here for supply chain risk management. And depending on the size of the company, you may have it automated, you may not, but there still needs to be some degree of due diligence of your counterparties, regardless of the value of the contract, to know who you're doing business with, because ultimately that will reflect on you and will reflect on the industry at large. Certainly enhanced levels of due diligence should be conducted for higher risk counterparties and the like. So that's what should be set forth in that procedure. Gifts and entertainment, we have a lot of dealings with public officials. It's part and parcel of how we do business in offshore wind. We can't get away from that. And it's important that we're managing the perception risks. It's not just whether we are actually bribing, but whether we are perceived as bribing or improperly influencing people. So having those appropriate procedures in place to monitor that. And then finally, before I joined Corio, I was not an offshore wind person. I was just a bribery and corruption guy in finance. If you Googled offshore wind and bribe, loads of academic articles about whether community contributions and sponsorships were really technically bribing the local communities. Are we bribing them to come along and get on board? My answer to that is, of course, no. But it's an interesting academic perception that maybe people think that it is inappropriate. So it's important that we're monitoring those and vetting those appropriately, ensuring that you get your compliance people involved. So very big risk because it is a perception risk, and perception can sometimes become realities. Sorry, I keep pointing the laser at Gunnar. I didn't realize. Sorry about that. And whistleblowing, making sure that people can raise concerns. They have open channels to be able to raise the concerns, not just when they see something going wrong, but when they have an idea of a better way to do things so that we can keep doing things right. So I talked about risk identification, mitigation, and control. Having that consistent baseline, a standard consistent baseline, not just for us as developers and initial top-tier suppliers, but all the way down the supply chain, actually will inure to everyone's benefit. So I encourage anyone that has any questions about how to implement this, please reach out to me. We are genuinely in this together. Compliance is one of those things where we need to work together very closely. So please have your compliance counterparts reach out to me if they have questions, because it's important that we get this right as an industry. So if you have questions, reach out to me. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gazaway. Please return to your seat. And next, I'd like to invite Global Head of Supply Chain and Procurement at Northland Power, Mr. Martin Tahir, to share his presentation on ESG in offshore wind supply chain. Please welcome.
Hi, hello. I'm actually going to build on your presentation, so that's cool, but I take it a little bit further. I'm going to talk about ESG. The G you just heard from Corio. I'm also talking about the E and the G. So, my name is Martijn de Heer. I work for Northland Power, and I'm the global head of procurement. And I look after procurement for offshore, onshore, and hydrogen. And why do I want to talk about ESG? I want to talk about ESG because for myself it's important, for my company it's important, it's the core of the value of our company, but also I think we as an industry and developers of offshore wind, it should be important for all of us. We should do what's right. And I'm going to explain that in a couple of slides. I'm going to explain a bit around what we do as Northland and what I think we need to be done. And I give some examples of what we do as a company. So, what will the world look like in 2023? That's not a typo. Normally you would see these slides and you would say, what would the world look like in 2030 or so? But you have seen yesterday already from the presentation, I think if you joined the drinks in the evening, you've seen from World Vision, I think it was, the presentation around all the things that are happening now. And things are happening now. The world will be hotter. We've seen yesterday the presentation in World Vision around the the disaster in Italy, I think, climate disasters will be a routine. We are seeing that happening at the moment. And we are also seeing that social inequities are challenging democracies worldwide. What we also see is that we see between, due to the war in Russia against the Ukraine, due to China and America having trade barriers, we're seeing global supply chains breaking up at the moment. Also, we're seeing that, and that I really loved the presentation, I think it was from Mr. Wang around AI, we're seeing that there's a lot of going on in hyper-digitalization. And that's going to make my job, at least, much more easier, because, I get the quotes from my suppliers, and I just ask ChatGPT, who should I choose? It's going to be transforming the way we do business, right? And we're seeing that sustainability is going to be on top of our corporate agendas. So, but it will be highly regulated. I'll show that in the next slide around some regulations all across the world. And it will be under public scrutiny as well. So I'm from the Netherlands, and just before I flew in here from Taiwan, there was a roadblock by protesters. We have a group, I'm not sure what the name is, but they're protesting against, the climate change, and they want the Dutch politicians to do more. And I was on that roadblock, so we'll see a lot of public scrutiny as well on what we do. So I think it's important as an industry that we not just talk about what we do now around sustainability or sustainable supply chains, but also sustainability in a sustainable supply chain. If we look at the global ESG regulations around the world, we see a lot of things happening. So I'm just taking the global picture as being responsible for the world. I'm based in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, there's a child labor law. That means a company located in the Netherlands who has in its supply chain child labor, it can be fined, massive fines, but also the directors can go to prison. We have all around regulations on ESG around the world, and as shown in the next slide, I expect much more to come. This is a lot of text in this slide, but as Nordland, we're really committed to a lot of policies and have a lot of commitments to different organizations to counterpart this. I'm personally responsible for over 2,000 suppliers every year, and that depends a bit. If we build more onshore or more offshore, we will have more or less suppliers. But I'm responsible for all the acts in the supply chain. And that's probably also an important one to highlight. And it's not indeed, as I said, the Act 1 suppliers, they will be fine probably. I mean, if I talk with Siemens or with Vestas, they can show me really nice policies around their ESGs. But it's more around the tier 2, tier 3 and further that will really have an impact also on me. So it's a much broader thing. That's just what I want to highlight with this slide. And we have, as Nordland at least, a lot of policies and commitments around this. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them, especially, let's start with the Supplier Partner Code of Conduct. As Corio explained, very important. We have one as well, and we want all the suppliers to sign it. But just signing it doesn't mean much. I mean, everybody can sign a document, but I want to know, are you really up for it? If I check you and you sign that you have no child labor, or you treat your suppliers well, are you really doing that? So we have a partnership with EcoVadis, an external company who audits all of our suppliers. At least we ask the suppliers to be audited and to really check if that the signature on the Supplier Code of Conduct is correct. I think that's an important one, because saying is one thing, but doing is a completely different thing, right? We have 4 ESG priorities as a company. I'll highlight these. First of all, climate change mitigation measures. What's also important, we're building these big green powerhouses in the sea. right? But we should build them also on a really sustainable manner. And sustainability is not, we're polluting the world to build an offshore wind farm. We use a lot of metals, we use a lot of rare earth materials, we have a lot of labor, we have people, we should treat these people well. We should treat the supply chain and the earth well in order to build these green powerhouses. So we look also in the second priority on the human rights in the supply chain. Are we really treating our workforce well? Are the suppliers treating their workforce well? And are the suppliers of the suppliers of the suppliers also treating their workforce well? We also look at biodiversity in the ecosystem. That means we're setting up these powerhouses in the sea. We have to look at the environment around. There are some regulations, but there's much more. We don't want to build it and then kill all the sea life and kill all the birds by building these powerhouses, right? So that's very important for us as well. And then we try to look at the long term. We are now discussing for 2 days the growth of offshore wind, and we see a huge potential. But that means we are setting up big metal green powerhouses in the sea. What do we do with these things after 20, 25, 30 years? We need to take them down. Or do we repower them? How does that work? So, or do we just let them go? And what in the oil industry happened, they just sank off their, drilling platforms into the ocean. Is that what we want to do as an industry? And I think it's important to say, we have to think about that now. And not after 20 or 30 years when these things need to get down and go, oh shit, how do we do that? Within Nordland, we have a process, and I'll just share the process in general, just to share a bit of thought around that. Maybe afterwards you can come to me and I can also furthermore explain and help, because it's just how to learn how we deal with these things as an industry. One thing I want to say, and that's the quote on the left, I'm not willing to compromise. So we are looking into this. We are looking at all the ESG values of our suppliers. If we notice that there's a supplier who is not upholding our values, I'm not compromising on that. I'm not dealing with that supplier. Also the subcontractors. So we'll check subcontractors as well. We have on a recent project where we discovered that one of the subcontractors was actually owned by the Russian government, and they were sanctioned. We're not compromising on that. We're not going to back with these suppliers, say, oh, maybe if you change. No, we're not dealing with these suppliers. We look at our suppliers. First, we'll start with an ESG risk assessment. So we'll look at their full ESG portfolio, and we'll assess them, and we'll ask them to join the EcoVadis initiative, which I'll tell you a little bit later, but that's the company who really checks if suppliers really upholding the values or not just signing a document, and that's it. We also look at the financial risk. There's a lot of financial risk at the moment in this industry. And we also look at our compliance and legal assessments. Like Corio was explaining, hugely important. We have external systems for that. It's not something that I do personally, but the systems will go to us and tell us what to do. So for the compliance and legal assessment, we use Dow Jones, just to share. And for the financial risk assessment, we have several tools around the world, including Dun & Bradstreet. Then when we say, okay, this supplier we can work with, we have the same values, basically. We get them on board, we get the contract, but also we'll send them before that a pre-qualification document with a lot of more detailed questions, also around safety, how they treat their people, how they work in a sustainable supply chain. So we're getting a lot more insights of how this supplier is performing. And then once they are on board, still, then it doesn't stop, basically. So it doesn't stop when the supplier is on board. We need to continuously monitor these suppliers if they are upholding the standards that we want. So if a supplier, in the end, has a leakage or is not treating their personnel well, then we start to have the conversation with them. EcoVadis is helping us with the CSR assessments. There's an external company. Why am I just mentioning this name a couple of times because actually in the APAC region, we are trying to get them on board, and we went to the supply chain with new projects, and new suppliers said, can you please join this initiative? Basically, the response rate was very low. So in the APAC region, we got a lot of low response rate on sustainability and suppliers joining. And they were basically like, yeah, Martijn, it's something you want, and we need to pay for it. We're not doing it. So that was quite a disappointment, and that's why I used this opportunity to re-stress how important it is for us to work with this. And EcoVadis is basically giving scorecards. I know some of the key suppliers here in this room do have it, and we look at these scorecards, and these scorecards will tell us, hey, this supplier is very good in sustainable procurement, in managing the environment, but not so good in, I don't know, treating the workforce. So we can have a discussion with this supplier around, hey, treating your workforce is also very important and part of what our values is and part of our ESG policies. And then they get a chance to improve. If they don't improve, I'm sorry, I'm not compromising. It is important, and that is maybe also a good one to stress, to have a portfolio approach around this. We get the learnings and synergies from the things we do in Europe, the things we do in Canada, South America, and also APAC region, and share that across. If I have one local supplier in a country which needs to join this initiative and needs to join other stuff, it's a big likelihood this supplier will either be already fully compliant and join, or will tell me, sorry, I'm not compliant, I'm not joining this initiative. And I don't have the buying power, basically, without my portfolio to force this supplier to become more sustainable. So I need my portfolio approach, my regional APAC portfolio approach on the supply chain to get things moving. If I have a scattered supply chain with a lot of suppliers in one specific country, it doesn't help me that much. But there needs to be a balance. So also as Nordland, as a company, we find it very important to build local communities, but there needs to be a balance between local and global. And to really build an efficient, sustainable supply chain portfolio, we need to have that balance around, okay, these local suppliers will join because there's a future for them in the portfolio. It's not easy in this industry, that's the last quote. It's a relatively new industry, especially in the APAC region. We see more buy-in power already on sustainability in Europe and in Americas. But we need to get this going, and we need to do what's right. And what's right is not only building a green powerhouse, but also building that on a sustainable manner. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. De Heer, for sharing with us. Please return to your seat. And next, I'd like to invite Senior Structural Engineer at BW Ideal, Mr. Kentaro Kimura, to share his presentation titled Serial Production of Concrete Floaters in Japan for High Local Content and Low Carbon Footprint. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Kentaro Kimura, Senior Structural Engineer of BW Ideal. Today, I'd like to talk about serial production of concrete floaters for floating offshore wind turbine in Japan with high local content and low carbon footprint. Firstly, I'd like to introduce BW Ideal's Japan office. The Japan office is located in Tokyo, from here around 7 hours door to door maybe. And we are working for EPCI contractor and also as co-developer of each FOWT project. The major JDA partner we can open today is such as Tohoku Electric Power and ENEOS Corporation and other enterprises. We also work for committees by government for floating offshore wind turbine, such as safety guideline of floating offshore wind turbine and guideline for concrete floaters for FOWT. Maybe Mr. Geshe introduced our floaters yesterday, but we have two full-scale demonstrators in France and in Japan. The left side is Progen demonstrator with concrete floater, and the right side is a Nedo Hibiki demonstrator, 2 megawatt steel floater. Both floater is in operation from 2019 until today without any malfunction. This slide shows our concrete floater's general characteristic. As you can see, our concrete floater have square shape, and the center, you can see the pool, so-called as dumping pool, which is permitted by IDEOL. And thanks to this shape and dumping pool, we can keep good seakeeping performance required for wind turbine and floating offshore wind turbine. Especially, our floater is compact and have very shallow draft in operation. As you can see this slide, for 15 megawatt turbine, the size of the floater is 53 meter by 53 meter. And the operational draft is 11 meter. Even in case the size of the turbine going up to 20 megawatt, we can keep the similar draft in operation. So, as you can see this screen, our floater can move with or without turbine inside, outside harbor as it is. To this slide, I can explain about the advantages of our concrete floater. Firstly, especially by the material and transportation and operation and maintenance, we have characteristic of concrete floater, which is much lower carbon footprint than steel. The right side, you can see the DNV report, which was opened last year, very detailed explanation about the comparison of steel floater and concrete floater from the point of carbon footprint. Secondly, concrete floater have higher durability than other type of structure. If we can make a good design and construction, we can expect much higher durability, and we can reduce operation and maintenance cost drastically. And finally, we can build concrete floater nearby the turbine location, so we can contribute local contents so much. The right figure is data from a Progen demonstrator in France. From this slide, I'd like to explain about how to serial production of concrete floaters. We plan to build concrete floater at 5 locations, from station 1 to station 5. At station 1, base slab and wall. And station 2, top slab. Station 3, other concrete. At station 5, the floater almost completed and go to the sea on the semi-submersible barge at the left side of this slide. Our floater at station 5 is around 13,000 tons, but we can carry such a heavy floater by IPCCV transport system provided by Biggin Whitman. So here I bring one movie for explanation of our concrete floaters serial production. Sorry. This movie is one sample of serial production factory Sorry. And this site is located at Scotland, and we are now under construction of this concrete floaters factory. So we plan to fabricate our concrete floater from here to other site. Starting from site preparation, ground reinforcement, we plan to put each fabrication facility like this. There are batch plant and delivery key here. And this facility is one sample. This facility is much depending on each country. So I think in Japan, such a big batch plant is not necessary. And our concrete floater is reinforcement concrete. So we plan to storage the steel reinforcement nearby main fabrication line. And our floater's top slab is planned to build by precast concrete. And at this location, we plan to make parts by precast concrete like this. And this is the main production line, which have 5 locations for construction. At station 1, we make all the walls in one time, like this, with gantry slip forming system, again by Bing Goodman. At station 2, we install the precast concrete parts for top slab. And at station 3, we install cast in situ concrete, which is remaining concrete outside of precast and other smaller parts. And at station 4, mainly for water tightness, we plan to install press resting force into the seats at station 4. And at station 5, remaining work such as painting and small equipment plan to install. Then the floater going on the barge and go to the sea. This movie is open to YouTube and our website, so if you have interest, please check it later. Okay. And about this, from this page, I'd like to explain about the concrete floater for construction. Our floater have 55% of concrete volume only for the wall, the red colored area of this picture. So the speed up of construction, especially for wall, is very critical for productivity increasement. Our floater is very simple, so we can make such a wall in one time with gantry slip forming construction method. This is assumed productivity of concrete floater. If we have a location to make 2 production lines like this picture, we can make fabrication at 550 floaters per year. That's good for big FOWT upcoming. We also have some quality advantages. As I show, we have no horizontal construction joint for the wall. This is good for water tightness, and we have good construction tolerance. And this is current status of business feasibility assessment in Japan. We conducted several business feasibility assessment in Japan and around the world, and we got a good result of such a study from many civil contractors. As we can see here, we can provide next generation concrete floater, which are compact and shallow draft, less carbon footprint, durable, with the ambitious expected construction period and cost. From here, I'd like to explain about the situation of Japan about concrete FOWT. This end of March, Japanese government announced one safety guideline for concrete FOWT, and we can follow this guideline and make design and construction based on the performance design principle. And another release is by major Japanese civil contractor, Sumitomo Mitsui Construction. They released one announcement. There's a result of feasibility study, which confirmed the cost and construction speed, which can meet the requirement of big FOWT. Okay, from this slide, I'd like to explain about also steel floater of BW Ideal. We are not only a concrete floater, we are plan to provide steel floater also. Again, our floater by steel is also very compact. For 15 megawatt, the size is similar with concrete 53 by 53. And the operational draft is around 8.5 meter, which is shallower than that of concrete floater. As you can see this slide, our steel floater is also so simple and only of plate material 355. So we do not request big and special equipment for bending or something for manufacturing. We plan to fabricate our steel floater similar method as normal vessels. We start from block and make final assembly at a big area, such as dry dock. As you can see this slide, this is Hibiki demonstrator's construction picture, but we can make same scenario as general vessels, and we conducted also several feasibility studies in Japan, and the result is, as noted here, only one shipyard, 40 floater per year is well feasible. So, as I introduced, we can provide two types of floater. One is concrete and another is steel. This is much depending on the requirement by local and developers or government or anything. That's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kimura, for sharing with us. And next, please welcome CEO of Bygging Uddemon, Mr. Anders Axelsson. Mr. Axelsson will share his presentation on serial production system for concrete floating substructures. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Thank you. My name is Anders Axelsson, and I'm the COO of Bygging Uddemon, Swedish company. And I'm about to explain a bit about serial production systems for concrete structures. I will give you a bit of a background of our company and how we see the future, what challenges the future provides, and how we meet these challenges by the means of our technology, experience, and will to contribute to this business. I will also provide some explanation about the development we have done, adapting our systems in order to meet these business requirements. I will also mention something about load-out operation and give you some video footage of how this looks like in reality. So, Bygge & Uddeman is an old company. We were founded in the 40s, focusing on delivering technology solutions for the construction industry. We have been working in more than 30 countries all across the globe, and we have been providing solutions, as I mentioned, for slip form and also for skidding and heavy lifting. With that kind of knowledge and background, and we have developed systems to be able to produce and launch structures in concrete in a serial manner. Up to now, we have successfully done 3,600 concrete units, ranging from 5,000 ton up to 20,000 ton. And we have been doing quite a lot of research and development lately due to this new industry, which we find quite interesting, since we know that we have the experience and the solutions to support this industry with. And with this in mind, we have developed a special solution, which is an optimized mega gantry slipform system to produce floaters in concrete. So, as BW Ideol's Kentaro-san mentioned previously, we have a target of delivering 25 units per year. We should facilitate for onshore batching plant, on-site batching plant. We have to make sure that there will be areas for preparation of rebars, top slab, etc. We have also to make sure that we have a system that would be able to do the vertical walls and a skidding system that allows the unit to be moved between production phases. And in addition, we should assure that load-out operation would be according to international standards. So this is how it looks like, the serial production system for BW Ideol's floater. We have developed and identified the site layout. We have designed and performed structural analysis of the gantry structure that assures that even if the site would be located in a difficult location such as Taiwan or Japan, it will cope with the wind conditions as they are in those markets. We have also facilitated that we can achieve construction with precast elements, such as top slab elements, and we have also made it possible to facilitate for post tensioning. And as I mentioned, we also have designed and optimized a skidding system for this layout. And we have already now been endorsed on several continents by leading construction companies that this is the way to do it. Because we, as experts of providing serial production systems in concrete, can identify that there are several designs for floating wind in concrete, but none of them, or few of them, consider manufacturing and how to do that rationally. It should be simple, it should be well thought through, and not too complex. As also Kentaro-san of BW mentioned, SMCC has announced that this system is quite feasible and both technically but also economically. And we are very happy and proud for this announcement. We were hearing previous speaker talking about minimizing risk, and that is why we have made. We were already from the beginning aware of that. Taking one concrete object of 30,000 ton onto a floating dock is quite risky business. But we have been doing this for 3,600 units, so we are fully aware of how to do. But we have also added the feature of complying with international standards for load-out operation. Okay, this is a video footage from one of our sites producing caissons, which is quite similar structure to a floating wind foundation. Let's try to see if it's, yes. As you can see, it's a steel structure that is holding a moving platform, which is the slip form. And the slipform system is operating around the clock, and we can adjust the speed as per local requirements or concrete recipe. So it is possible to go between 2 and 8 meters per 24 hours. So the slipform is constantly operating, as I mentioned, and for this system, we haul and install materials such as rebar and concrete from this platform. This is also an image of video footage of how we skid the concrete structure from one step to another, which what we will do for BW Ideol floating concrete structure as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Axelsen. And ladies and gentlemen, we will move on to our panel discussion shortly, and we will take a few minutes for our staff to prepare the stage.